So I'm Nick Price, CEO of Bright Purple, and today I'm here with Christian Arno, the CEO and founder of Pawprint. And I was reading Empowering Employees to Fight Climate Change at Work, Home and Beyond. So welcome, Christian. And I suppose we've known each other in the past. So 24 years at a technology translation business, Lingo24. You jump to the climate agenda. What was the driver?
Yeah, well, I guess there were a few factors, Nick. So dating back to when I was a 19-year-old and I fell out with my best mate over how we were going to change the world. He believed in revolution and I was determined that you could do it through business. And through the journey you just referenced with Lingo, I think I always felt, I enjoyed that journey, learned a lot, but I always felt there was something missing. I wanted something that had purpose to it. And I moved into a non-exec role with Lingo. And around that time, my dad had his climate change epiphany to such an extent that he joined Extinction Rebellion and blocked a road near here, Lothian Road in Edinburgh. And I had a weird surge of pride in my dad as he, got arrested, was on national TV, and lay down for what he believed in. And he sort of sat me down. I think I was talking, maybe complaining about Brexit at the time, and he said, Christian, you really, that is an issue. I understand why you care about that, but the climate agenda has much wider ramifications for you, particularly with your young family. So combination of those factors.
Okay. And so Pawprint, tell us a little bit about it. We know it's about carbon capture, carbon footprint capture. Tell us more.
Yeah. So as I was looking at the space and trying to work out what I could do, I found that there was a gap for me as an individual as well to understand what I could take action on. There's a lot in the media, and there has been for a while, about recycling and plastics and all these sorts of things. But there are other things that matter. And so I was looking for some sort of app that would help me to understand what was appropriate to my life circumstances, which, would be different to yours and be different for each and every person watching this. So the idea was always to put the individual at the core of it and say, okay, this is a really worrying situation, but I can do things. And so we want individuals to be able to measure, understand and reduce their own carbon footprint, but we also want them to start affecting and accelerating change through their businesses and also through any other spheres of influence they have. So okay. That's the idea.
And it's climate change is such an emotive subject. It's there are the activists like your dad, and there are probably as you said, intergenerational people now who are, some are taking it seriously, some seem to not care about it, to be honest. What's the reaction been to Pawprint, considering you're actually talking about carbon capture and people are still flying, people are still digging coal out of the ground, etc.? So what has been the reaction to the business itself?
Well, we've set out from the start to be non-judgmental. We've got this polar bear mascot called Bjorn, and the first thing he says to people when they get their Pawprint, because people are like, oh my god, that's my impact, is don't beat yourself up. It's about small steps and it's about what's right for you. And so having that approach, I guess, has insulated us from too much criticism. And we definitely believe that we need to be a broad church. We all need to work together on what we view as our sort of collective world war in terms of how we need to come together. So.
And it's interesting when you mention small steps, because obviously governments are talking about these giant changes, but they keep missing targets. Our own government here in Scotland, everybody, they keep missing targets. Is the answer small steps, and therefore the empowerment of people on the ground, the youth of today, etc.? Is it all about small steps rather than these giant targets that we keep hearing about?
I think we need to be fighting this war I talk about on all fronts. So the big ones are important, but also everybody does have a level of power through their vote, through their purchasing decisions, through the spheres of influence they have. And what we're trying to do is give, the majority of people a channel through which they can understand what makes a difference and then agitate for change in a way that's right for them.
And it's interesting because we've talked before, and you mentioned there it's a war.
Yeah.
You've got an interesting grandma story. I know obviously you're part Scandinavian.
Yeah.
Tell us about your Norwegian grandma story, because I thought it was very apt.
Yeah, so my Norwegian grandmother, my farmor, came over to Scotland during the war on the Shetland Bussen, and I was very close to her, and she talked to me about the world, about the war, and about how that was one of the happiest periods of her life, which sounds like a sort of perverse thing to say. But what she said about that period was that people from all walks of life, all nationalities on, I guess, the Allied side came together for a common goal. And she hadn't seen at any stage in her life, other than that sense of people coming together, putting the traditional differences aside. And I think that climate change is undeniably the same dynamic. In fact, it brings us together even more neatly as a global community. We need to not think about too much about the things that divide us, but unite ourselves around the things we can do.
So we've been listening to people talk about climate optimism.
Mm.
What's your view on climate optimism? Are you optimistic that there are answers?
I think it's a situation where you certainly can't have blind optimism, and there's a truckload of work that we need to get done. So in some ways, I am an optimist, but in some ways, I don't have the time for sort of blind optimism, or it's about action. And to your point earlier about the noises coming from government, it's pretty clear to me that the vast majority of us are sick to the back teeth of noise and really keen on action. And if Pawprint helps millions of people to take that action, happy days.
Yeah. Well, I think also, when you look at the youth who we are pouring pressure onto, because we keep talking about they are the ones that are actually going to be carrying the responsibility for the damage that my generation did.
Don't beat yourself up.
Well, I'll try not to beat myself up. I'm trying to think about my own three kids, to be honest. But yeah, and I know you've got a young family as well. But you think that? Do you think that? We obviously all have a role to play, yeah. But do you think that my generation are listening properly to the youth?
It's a really interesting question. I think increasingly, because the message from younger people is pretty strong and is pretty clear that we're not moving fast enough.
Yeah.
Obviously, everybody's different, but I think we can. I think increasingly it is that universal thing. As we talk to different businesses and different people, everybody says, "Yeah, I want to do my bit," but they're a bit stuck sometimes at what that bit is.
Yeah, and I mean, your dad, 70-year-old Extinction Rebellion activist, Greta Thunberg, obviously the other end of that scale, 18, I think she is now, or 19. Yeah. Who are the ambassadors out in the world just now that you think are actually doing something, or at least trying to do something, rather than just talking about it? So, do you have people out there that you see doing something?
Yeah, I mean, I was recently at the TED Countdown Summit here in Edinburgh with some of the leading lights in the climate world, and Christiana Figueres, who's one of the architects of the Paris Agreement from 2015, is undoubtedly a leading figure. And there was a quite well documented episode at that event where a young Scottish climate activist took on the chief exec of Shell, and you could see how she was really central to this whole discussion, but also genuinely emotionally engaged with all of the people in that room. It was one of the most emotional sort of businessy type events I've ever experienced. So she's a key figure. Another one is Nigel Topping, who's heading up a lot of the efforts around the race to zero, and he is working tirelessly and with great skill and concern for the different parties to make things happen. So there are a whole host of really top people working on this, and that does give me cause for optimism.
That's good. And are there local people that you think are, I mean, in our own market, you're in Scotland, who stand out as people who are at least trying to do something?
I think there are lots of businesses, many of whom are a bit under the radar.
Okay.
One of the people who stood out for me and who supported Pawprint a lot is a guy called Will Richardson, who's built a tool called Compare Your Footprint. He's been fighting this fight for a long time. He is no holds barred, and I've got a huge amount of respect for him. So, but there are lots of people now, and one of Mike Berners-Lee's point is that rather than the most gifted people in society join, let's say Googles and Facebooks and lawyers and accountants and recruitment firms, we want to get some of those most gifted people working on the world's biggest problems. So we're definitely seeing an influx of top people to what we're doing, and I think that trend's going to continue.
And so Pawprint, I mean, obviously started as a another one of the SME community in Scotland, but you're fighting on a global agenda. So are you attracting? Do you find that it's bringing these big names to you because you're visibly fighting something that the world absolutely cares about now?
Yeah, we've got the there aren't many companies. I've come across one or two who have said this is not relevant to us. This is not on our agenda. Quite the opposite. And when companies do engage with us, they want to shout about it as well. Partly for external reasons, it looks good towards their clients, and some clients, as we've discussed, are demanding it. But more actually because they're people, and they're younger people. I would say that is a trend. The 20-somethings, the 30-somethings are this cuts to the core of who they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And when we talked about Pawprint, you were talking about the ability to actually set challenges, the ability, and we all like a challenge. So it's quite interesting. But you started talking about how you could maybe look to reward staff with eco perks.
Yeah.
I'd never even heard about eco perks when you told me. Actually.
Yeah.
So tell us something about how you might get involved with eco perks, etc.
With eco, well, we're a bit early for that. We're just trialing it with a couple of our pioneers, our close clients. But the idea is that an employer will financially support their employees to become lower carbon citizens at home and at work based on what they know about their Pawprint. And so they might, and it would be on a use it or lose it basis. So they might contribute £10, £20, £50, £100 a month, depending on the business, to help that employee reduce their food toe print by having delicious plant-based meals at home or delivered to their home, or it might be supporting a bike repair so they can reduce their travel toe print, and the list goes on of all these different.
Yeah, it's interesting taking them down the pub for a change, isn't it? To be honest, so which is the usual way. What does COP mean to you? You've got 3 young children, all under 10. What does COP mean to you when you wake up in the morning and you COP26? What does it mean to you when you wake up in the morning and look at your kids and think about their future? How important is COP, and what do you want to see come out of COP in the end?
I think so. I mean, I find having young kids, especially my daughter Jemima, played a polar bear in her Christmas nativity, which was all around.
Perfect.
Yeah, and she was singing a song about how all this melting has to stop, and not having a clue that how much of an issue that is going to be for her. That was the single most emotional moment around climate I've had to do with my kids. In terms of COP, I think what we just really want firm commitments broadly to get the direction moving. I think, there are certain challenges within the world that are bigger than others. The fact that we are focused on GDP as a measure of success, I think is problematic. Continually growing has challenges with sustainability. So I think there need to be some thoughts about what we really want for people. I'm very interested in the work of Kate Rayworth with Donut Economics as well, which is a new economic model. So those things are important, but really it's just as much. I think the level of noise and the level of widespread concern is at peak point, and we just need to see some solid delivery and agreements.
Some affirmative action.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I know you talked in the past about Bill Gates and the green premium. Yeah, what's your view on that thinking, and is it working?
Yeah, I think it's a really useful way to look at things in our life, whether that's at an economic level, at a business level, or at a personal level. If the cost to you of making that the greener choice, an electric car versus a petrol car, or a train versus a flight, if the cost to you of doing that is significantly higher, it's not going to scale. We need to make sure that the price differential between the green option, there's a green discount rather than a green premium for all the choices, but also that it's convenient as well. I'm going to a conference in Switzerland in December, and I would be very willing to do that by train, and I probably will do it by train, but the cost of doing that, it's going to be more than £1,000 more expensive to do it, which is just bonkers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's interesting, isn't it, that we keep trying to get people off flights. Yeah, you can get a flight to, I don't know, Bratislava for £9. But as you say, it's going to cost you thousands to get there on a train.
Yeah. So we've got to, I mean, that's a combination of, people power saying what we want, governments listening and being progressive, and then businesses seeing the opportunity in that. There's huge opportunity in this transition.
And for Pawprint, you talk about, I suppose, in closing, you talk about Pawprint on your website as building a movement. Yeah, and we seem to be seeing lots of movements now growing around the world. But what's your hopes for Pawprint now in these, in these next years, especially that you've got COP throwing, a real limelight on what Pawprint are doing just now. So what's your goals for COP as we move past COP?
As we move past COP, we're moving as fast as we can, raising as much investment as we can to become the global de facto leader in employee engagement on sustainability. That's what we're doing. We're about to launch a crowdfunding exercise as part of the finance package there, and build that sense of a movement. We've had huge support from the people who've invested so far, and as I said, it needs to be a broad church. So the hope is that people will increasingly rally round organisations such as Pawprint and, start moving faster on all the things that we need to do.
Christian, thanks very much. I wish you well with it and success.
Thanks very much, Nick.
All the best.
All the best.